Hey everyone, it's Zara, and I am back to film my reading journal for the month of April. So first things first, I have my reading tracker for how much time I read each day. As you can see, I have a lot of times that I read for, under an hour, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. I was trying to read every day in April. Didn't succeed because I went to a conference and didn't read at all on the 2 days of the conference, but still read most of the days. Didn't read as many books in April, and I think in May I'm just going to read when I want to, not necessarily worry about reading every day, because sometimes I feel like when I just read a chapter or two at a time, I just don't really get sucked into the book as much. And so anyways, I just want to not have the pressure to read every day if I'm just not feeling it. So then moving on to everything I read this month. I read 7 books, which, I think I finished these 2 in the last, couple of days of April. But I read 2 series. So Ninth House and Hellbent are part of a series, and then Me Before You is 3 books in a series. So kind of series heavy this month. And my favorite book was Ninth House, but I will say part of me kind of wanted to put Me Before You in there as well, and I went back and forth on which one was my most favorite out of the 2, and I'm not sure if it was Ninth House or Me Before You. I keep going back and forth in my mind, but both good books, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Then here are the days that I started and finished every book. These stickers are from Live Love Posh. The dot stickers are from Mojo Jojo Plans, and yeah, it's just kind of seeing when I was reading, starting and finishing books. Then on to kind of my overview, my planning. So this month in April, I really wanted to focus on books that I owned because I feel like I get distracted. I'm always on the Libby app just checking the lucky day section, or I don't know what's available. And so a lot of times I'll just pick things up just kind of that sound good or I've heard about, and I don't focus on books that have been on my shelf for a really long time that I haven't read, that, I've almost forgotten about in a way because they're older, maybe they're not in the spotlight as much anymore. And so anyways, I just wanted to focus on books that I read. So I started off the month by putting down all the books that I really wanted to focus on this month. So I think it was up until Still Me. And as you can see, I didn't read a lot of the books that I originally thought I was going to read. Those ones I'm going to carry over to my TBR for May, and hopefully I'll finish them in May. But I, other than Daisy Jones and the Six and the Locked Door, which I guess was 2 out of the 7, all the other books I owned. And so, yeah, just good to, try to focus on books that I already own, that I've bought, that have been on my, want to read list for a while. I also finally finished, I've had this Bookopoly roll, which Bookopoly and Roll Your Read are 2 games that I've been doing. Bookopoly is kind of a Monopoly based one, and Roll Your Read is a dice based, so you have different cards, and depending on what you roll, that's the prompt that you choose. And I've been trying to do 1 per month, and I know Bookopoly, I think I rolled this one, I think I rolled it at the end of February or mid-February when I finished my previous one, and it was, Roll Your Read was the one that I rolled, includes a map, and I didn't do it in February, I didn't do it in March, but I finally did it in April, and that's part of the reason why Ninth House got added. It was on my shelf, and it had a map at the beginning of it of the Yale campus. So finally got to check that one off. That one was a harder prompt for me. I think if you read a lot of fantasy books, that would be an easier prompt to do, but fantasy is not usually, or not as much my genre. Not that it's not usually, but I don't read as many fantasy books as I do thrillers, mysteries, and so it was nice to find a book in my genre, or one of my preferred genres that had that. I also had Might Make You Cry, I read Me Before You. For Bookopoly, I had gotten a chance, or Update Your Reading Journal, which, I mean, I do that anyways, so that one wasn't really a, hard prompt to fulfill. And then read a borrowed book. I had The Locked Door from the library. And then I also rolled a light blue cover, which I haven't read yet, but I think, I know Drums of Autumn has a kind of a light blue cover, so that'll probably be the book that I try to read in May to get that prompt. Mostly I read, read books. I only had the one audiobook this month. I will say I own the Me Before You books, but I ended up reading them on my Kindle because I didn't want to carry the books with me to my conference that I went to, and then it was just easy to pull it up on my phone or on my Kindle to read once I got home too. And then I usually fill out a bingo, just kind of focusing on books. My book of the month, I did not read this month. A newer TBR. I mean, I guess I could have probably put Ninth House or Hellbent on there, but I used them for other prompts. And then I started my classic. Hopefully I will finish that in May. I started reading Oliver Twist, which I will say, it's kind of, I have to read a chapter here or there. I can't just binge it. And then my top priorities for the month were to focus on books that I owned, finish a series, and read every day. So like I said, I didn't read every day, but I did, complete the other two. So I think April was a success all in all. So then moving back to my tracking, I have my Goodreads tracker. I've filled up the first page, so I think I'm at 37 books for the month so far, or for the year. 37 books in a month would be a lot. But this Goodreads tracker is from the Shelfie Chronicles, as are the little stickers inside. And as you can see, I like to make it, rainbow colored. And so there's a couple that I ran out of the big icons, so I have a small icon, which I'll probably swap out eventually when I next place an order with her. Then moving into the individual book reviews, I think this part might be a little bit short just because with series, I feel like I shouldn't go too in-depth in the series because otherwise that spoils, what happened in the first book if you're talking about what's going to happen in the second. But anyways, I started off with Daisy Jones and the Six. I really enjoyed this one. I had picked it up from the library. I think this is my fourth Taylor Jenkins Reid book, and I think I've read all of the ones in her kind of around the same time frame. I think they call it like the Readiverse. I think that's like Malibu Rising, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones and the Six, and Carrie Soto is Back. I think those four are all like in the same universe. They kind of mention or have mentions to some of the other books within it, but you can read them in any order. So I finished Daisy Jones and the Sixth. I gave it 5 stars, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. It's definitely about like 1970s rock and roll. You have, a band going on tour, and, kind of the hardships that you have within that, the drama within being in a band, especially with so many people in a band. So you have Daisy Jones, who is a very vibrant personality. She's coming of age in the 70s and, starts or gets like a record deal, and eventually her record label or her manager, I can't remember who, decides that she should team up with this band called The Six, and they should release an album together and go on tour together, and that would, be even better than just the two of them separately. And then you have The Six, which is fronted by Billy Dunn. And one thing I thought was really interesting about the book is it's told in a series of like interviews. It's an oral history, And so you essentially have these characters, these fictional characters that are looking back at their life, creating this album, going on tour, you know, kind of reflecting on things. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it's not my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I think my favorite out of the four is Carrie Soto's Back. I really loved that one. And so, but still an excellent novel. I think that she's a good writer. Then we have one that I did not like as much. I think this was my lowest rated book this month, The Locked Door. So this is a Frida McFadden novel, and I feel like Frida McFadden has a big fan base. She writes a lot of thrillers. The Housemaid and the second Housemaid book are the two that I've read previously, but I needed an audiobook because I think we were just going out of town, and I wanted something to listen to while we drove. And so I picked this one up. It wasn't very long. I just didn't love it. I mean, I read it fast, but I just didn't love it. So with The Locked Door, you have Nora, and her father is a serial killer. He, killed his victims in their basement. There was a locked door in their house. The story that the mom and the dad gave is that, he was down there doing woodworking, and, you don't go down into the basement. That's his space. Anyways, he's caught. Eventually, he's in jail, and now Nora has reinvented herself. It's, I think, 25 years later. She's reinvented herself. She's changed her last name, and she is a surgeon now. So no one really knows about her past. She lives kind of this quiet life, but now in the 25 years later, there's a serial killer, like copycat, that starts killing people in a very similar fashion to how her dad did it. And so obviously the police start to suspect her, and it's kind of whether or not she is the one killing these people or if someone is trying to frame her. And there's kind of past storylines involved as well. You go back to her as a child, around the time her dad got caught, and trying to figure out, did she know about that, and what was she like as a child, kind of too. I did not like Nora as a character. I just thought she made some really stupid decisions. For someone that is a surgeon, that obviously has to have a lot of brain power. Like, you have to be very smart to be a surgeon, in my opinion. And she just made some really stupid moves, stupid choices, and I just didn't love that. And then there was a past storyline with bullying that I just really didn't like. Like, every time those chapters came up, it just viscerally, I hated it. And they're so mean to this person. And I didn't think that really contributed to anything in the end, so I didn't know why I had to listen to it. But not to say that I'm knocking off Frida McFadden. I just didn't enjoy this book. But I'm still willing to give some of her others a try because she has so many, and I feel like so many people like Frida McFadden. This was just not it for me. So then moving on to Ninth House. This was the one I selected as my favorite for the month. I will say, again, I started off with reading like a chapter here, a chapter there, just to, kind of fit in some reading at the end of my day. And so it took me a little bit to get into it, just because it really like dives you headfirst into the deep end. Some books, they, explain things, and really just kind of gently ease you into the story. This one, you dove into the deep end, and you kind of had to figure out what was going on, after a couple of chapters. But they definitely dive you right in terms of terminology, in terms of story, plot, right away. And so once I could kind of get a grip on what all was going on, I really enjoyed it. And once I had time to read a more significant chunk at a time, like 100 pages, I really enjoyed it. So Ninth House is about Alex Stern. Alex has had a rough go of things You know, she's used drugs, she's gotten in with kind of a bad crowd, and she ends up kind of surviving this horrific homicide of all of her kind of like associates and her best friend, and she is given the opportunity by this person that shows up in her hospital bed or hospital room to go to Yale and essentially, you know, be a student at Yale and become what is part of the, and I don't know how, if I'm saying this right, the Lethe House. It's Lethe. And essentially what that is Yale has a bunch of secret societies that deal with the occult, they deal with magic, and the Lethe House essentially is the 9th house that oversees the activity of the other 8. And the reason why they handpick Alex is she can see ghosts. She can see what they call the gray. And she doesn't need a special potion, which is usually how people see the ghosts around them. And so that's really important because a lot of these ghosts are drawn to the magic, and you don't want to, you know, get them necessarily involved with the magic because bad things can happen. And so a lot of it is just kind of monitoring the situation, you know, and keeping everyone at bay. So like I said, there's a lot of magic. There's a lot of like different things going on in this book. And obviously things don't go as planned. And so I just really enjoyed it. It was, like I said, very different than, different than anything I'd read before. I liked, there was some kind of like history aspects, or, you know, looking back at different people, and obviously you had all of the 8 houses deal with different types of magic, so it was fun kind of hearing about, I don't know, the different ceremonies or the different things that, you know, shape-shifting versus contract binding versus, you know, providing inspiration to an author. Just very interesting. So, like I said, I gave it 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. And as soon as I finished this book, it ended on a cliffhanger. As soon as I finished this book, I immediately had to go pick up Hellbent. And I was really glad I had them both on my shelf. Didn't realize it at the time that I started Ninth House, but I had picked up Hellbent like last summer when I was with my cousins. So I was really glad I had it to immediately dive into. And I'm not going to say too much about Hellbent because you really, like, there's a lot that goes on in Ninth House that leads up to Hellbent, and you wouldn't be able to read Hellbent without reading Ninth House, I don't think at all. But essentially what Hellbent is that they are trying to break into hell to save a soul. And so I'll just leave it at that, but not as much my favorite. I still gave it 5 stars, but I think that Ninth House was better. Not that Hellbent was bad, but I feel like there were a couple of concepts that were a little bit more over my head, harder to get my head around, but still really enjoyed it, still really liked it. And I think there's going to be more continuations in the series. I think it's probably a couple of years off, but I'm excited to read more when it's written. So then the last series I have is called the Me Before You series. This is a JoJo Moyes series. And funny story, I've read Still Me before. A number of years ago, I got it from the library. I can't even remember why, if it was just it came up on audiobooks available now and it sounded interesting, but it didn't say that it was the 3rd book in the series. And I listened to it, and there were definitely parts that like she alluded to past events, and I said, wow, this is an interesting way of storytelling. Like, they're not really giving you the whole story, you're kind of having to figure it out in these different snippets. But obviously I still really enjoyed the story. I still managed to make it all through, understand what was going on. But then I got to the end, and I think that was like right when I was starting to use Goodreads. And so I went to log it in Goodreads, and then it said it was the third book. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want to immediately read the third book and then go back to the first two, because I know kind of what happened based on things in the third book. But I bought the books, I bought the whole series on Amazon, put it on my shelf with the intention that I would, wait long enough that I kind of forgot what happened in Still Me, and then go back and read all three. So now, 5 years later, I'm at that point. And so these were also the oldest books on my TBR. I think, like I said, I think I had just created a Goodreads account in maybe 2019, 2018, something like that. And so I had logged that I read that, and then I put this and this as my first two, my oldest TBR. So in an effort to read books that have been on my shelf for a while, I obviously went back to the oldest books on my TBR and came to these. So starting off with Me Before You, this is definitely my favorite out of the three now that I've read all three. But Me Before You starts off, you have Louisa, and Louisa is, kind of a down on her luck. She was working in a cafe, but the cafe owner decides to shut down the cafe, and now she doesn't have a job. Her family, which is comprised of her parents, her grandpa, who is definitely needs caring for, her sister, and then her sister's child. They all live together in the one house, and for various reasons, some people can't work, some people can't work very much, and then her dad is really convinced that he's going to lose his job, and so her losing her job is very significant to the family workings, and whether or not they can make it or not. They're in an economic downturn, and so getting a job is hard, and an opportunity comes up for her to essentially be kind of a companion, or just kind of spend time with a quadriplegic named Will. It's a good paying job, and she has no medical qualifications, but that's not what they're looking for. They have someone that does his medical, responsibilities, but they essentially just want someone to keep him company, keep an eye on him, do whatever he needs. And she doesn't feel qualified, but she goes to the interview, gets the job, and goes. And Will is obviously frustrated by his situation in life. He used to be a big business person. He used to be able to travel, and he was very full of life before his accident. He got hit by a motorcycle or something like that when he was walking in London, and so he's been a quadriplegic for I think like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. So it's still somewhat recent, and he's definitely not super friendly to Louisa when she first comes. But the story is essentially about them, getting to know each other, and essentially getting to know each other and kind of understanding his situation in life and everything like that. And I think, a trigger warning for suicide is important, if that's something that is tough for you. But I really enjoyed this book. I cried a lot. It was beautiful and fun without being I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. It was beautiful. So I didn't know what to rate it. If it was fiction or romance, because there's both in there. And then some of the later books I wouldn't necessarily say are a romance, so I put them as fiction. And so yeah, I really enjoyed Me Before You. I think there's a movie that I need to go check out, but it's really good. And like I said, I do think the other ones are worth reading. The After You was not my favorite book out of the three. I gave it 4 stars, but I probably could have given it 3 too. But I did really like Still Me, and I gave that one 5 stars too. 4.5, 5. And I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it, but basically I think you should read that if you haven't, because I think that this is a good series. I don't think I'm going to go over my challenges. I didn't read that many books this month, and I feel like I didn't mark off too many challenges, but I hope you enjoyed watching my reading journal for the month of April. Looking forward to May. I've already filled out some things in my May pages. I've already got my Bookopoly Roll Your Read set up, and then like I said, I want to try to read some of the books that were on my list in April that I didn't get to, and yeah, and then 2 books that I want to read for sure are going to be Oliver Twist, which I've already started, and The Dictionary of Lost Words, which was a book that my mom gave to me that she recommended. So we'll see how May goes, but I hope you have, a great month, and I will see you in May. Bye now.